The cold November wind cut through Maya's thin jacket like a knife. She pulled her knees closer to her chest, trying to make herself smaller behind the dumpster at the back of the public library. This spot had become her bedroom for the past 8 months, ever since everything fell apart. It wasn't much, but it was safer than most places. The library closed at 9, and the security guard, Mr. Patterson, pretended not to notice her when he did his rounds. He'd never said anything directly, but sometimes he'd leave the back door unlocked just a crack longer than necessary, giving Maya a few extra minutes to use the bathroom before the building went dark for the night. Maya was 17 years old, though most days she felt about 40. Her mother had died from cancer 8 months ago, and with her went everything Maya had ever known as home. There were no other relatives, no safety net, no trust fund, just medical bills that swallowed up what little her mom had left behind, and a landlord who needed the apartment for paying tenants. The system tried to help, or at least that's what the social worker said. But Maya had heard the stories about foster care from kids at school. She'd be placed with strangers, maybe moved to a different district, forced to leave behind the only thing she had left, her school, her job, her dignity. So when they came looking for her at the hospital after her mom passed, Maya ran, and she'd been running ever since. Most people wouldn't guess she was homeless. That was the point. Every morning, Maya woke up before dawn, stuffed her sleeping bag into her backpack, and headed to the community center 3 blocks away. They opened at 6 for early morning exercise classes, which meant the showers were available. Maya had learned to time it perfectly, slip in with the fitness crowd, shower quickly, change into her school clothes, and be out before anyone asked questions. She kept 2 sets of clothes: school clothes and sleeping clothes. The school outfit got washed every few days at the laundromat, using quarters she'd carefully saved. She'd sit there doing homework while her clothes tumbled in the dryer, just another student trying to get through the week. School was Maya's lifeline. It was the one place where she could still be normal, or at least pretend to be. She was a senior at Lincoln High, maintaining a 3.8 GPA despite everything. Her teachers thought she was just another hardworking student. Her classmates thought she was quiet and studious. Nobody knew that she'd slept behind a library the night before, or that the backpack she carried everywhere held everything she owned in the world. Lunch was always the hardest part of the day. Maya had a free lunch card, but she couldn't eat the whole meal. She'd eat half and save the rest for dinner, wrapping it carefully in napkins and tucking it into her bag. Some days, when the hunger got really bad, she'd think about asking for seconds, but that would draw attention, and attention was dangerous. After school, Maya went straight to her job at Burger Palace on 5th Street. The manager, Luis, had given her the position 6 months ago, no questions asked. He paid her cash under the table since she didn't have a proper address for the paperwork. Maya suspected he knew more about her situation than he let on, but he never pushed. He just gave her as many hours as she could handle, and sometimes accidentally made extra burgers that needed to be thrown out right before her shift ended. The job paid for the essentials: a storage locker across town where she kept her mom's photo albums and a few precious belongings, her phone bill, because without a phone she couldn't get work or stay enrolled in school, laundry, soap, the occasional new pair of socks when the old ones wore through. Every penny was accounted for, every dollar a small victory in the war to survive. Maya saved whatever she could in a small lockbox hidden in her storage unit. $43 so far this month. At this rate, she calculated it would take her 9 months to save enough for first and last month's rent on a room somewhere. 9 months seemed like forever, but it was a goal, something to work toward when the nights got too cold and too scary. The nights were the worst part. That's when the fear crept in, when Maya couldn't push it away with schoolwork or the busy pace of her job. She'd lie awake, listening to every sound, wondering if tonight would be the night someone discovered her spot. There were other homeless people in the area, some kind, some not. There were also people who preyed on those living on the streets, seeing easy targets in the desperate and alone. Maya had learned to trust her instincts. If something felt wrong, she moved. There was a 24-hour diner 2 miles away where she'd sometimes walk in the middle of the night, nursing a single cup of coffee for hours when fear kept her from her usual spot. The waitresses knew her by now, never rushed her, and sometimes brought her free refills without being asked. Despite everything, Maya refused to give up on her dreams. She'd applied to 5 colleges, all with good financial aid programs. Her school counselor, Mrs. Chen, had helped her fill out the applications. writing recommendation letters that brought tears to Maya's eyes. Mrs. Chen didn't know about the homelessness. Maya had been careful about that, but she knew Maya was special, that she had something worth fighting for. Some nights, when the cold wasn't too bad and the stars were visible above the city lights, Maya would let herself imagine the future. A dorm room of her own, a real bed, classes where she'd learn about psychology and maybe, someday, help other kids who'd lost everything. A life where she didn't have to count every quarter or wonder where her next meal would come from. But then morning would come, and with it the reality of another day to survive. Maya would pack up her sleeping bag, hide it in her backpack, and start the routine all over again. Shower at the community center, school, job, find something to eat, find somewhere safe to sleep, repeat. The thing that kept her going wasn't hope exactly. Hope felt too fragile for the life she was living. It was something more solid than that. Determination, maybe, or stubbornness. Her mother's voice in her head, telling her she was strong enough, smart enough, brave enough to make it through this, tonight. As Maya settled into her spot behind the library, she pulled out her worn algebra textbook. There was a test tomorrow and she couldn't afford to fail. The streetlight at the corner provided just enough illumination to study by. She'd gotten good at this, at finding light in dark places, at making something from nothing. A few blocks away she could hear sirens. Somewhere someone was having an emergency, their whole world changing in an instant. Maya knew that feeling. She'd lived it. But she'd also learned something important in these 8 months on the streets. You're stronger than you think you are. And sometimes the worst moments of your life are preparing you for something you can't see yet. She didn't know it then. But tomorrow night would prove that lesson in ways she never could have imagined. Tomorrow night, Maya would make a choice that would change everything. But for now, she had algebra to study and another night to survive. And survive she would, because that's what Maya did. That's who she'd become. The algebra test had gone better than expected. Maya felt a small surge of satisfaction as she handed in her paper, one of the last students to finish. She'd used every minute available, checking her work twice. In her world, there was no room for careless mistakes. The November afternoon was already growing dark as she left school. Winter was coming early this year, and Maya could feel it in the air. She pulled her jacket tighter and headed toward Burger Palace, mentally calculating her hours for the week. If Luis could give her a double shift on Saturday, she might be able to add an extra $10 to her savings. But when she arrived at work, Luis met her at the door with an apologetic expression. Maya, I'm so sorry. The district manager is doing surprise inspections this week. I can't have you on the floor without proper paperwork. It's too risky right now. Maya's stomach dropped.
How long?
Maybe a week, maybe 2. I'll call you as soon as he's gone. Luis pressed something into her hand. 2 $20 bills. For the shifts you'll miss. I'm really sorry, kid. Maya wanted to protest, to tell him she couldn't accept charity, but the words stuck in her throat. $40 was $40. Thank you, she managed. Walking away from the restaurant, Maya felt the familiar weight of anxiety settling on her chest. 2 weeks without work meant 2 weeks without income, without the free food, without the warm place to spend her evenings. She'd have to make every dollar stretch further than usual. The bus stop on the corner was crowded with people heading home from work. Maya stood apart from them, watching office workers and shop clerks climb onto buses that would take them to apartments and houses, to families and hot dinners. She used to be one of them in a different life, a life with a mother who waited at home, who asked about her day, who made spaghetti on Tuesdays because it was Maya's favorite. She shook off the memory. Nostalgia was a luxury she couldn't afford. The crowd at the bus stop thinned as vehicles came and went. Maya checked her phone. 6:30. The library would stay open until 9. She could go there, do homework, stay warm for a few more hours. But her stomach was already growling, and she'd only had half a sandwich at lunch. That's when she noticed the old man. He was standing near the bench, one hand pressed against his chest, his face pale and covered in sweat despite the cold. He was well dressed, wearing an expensive-looking coat and polished shoes. But his breathing was labored, and he seemed to be struggling to stay upright. People rushed past him, absorbed in their phones, their music, their own lives. A woman nearly bumped into him and muttered an apology without even looking up. Maya took a step closer. "Sir, are you okay?" The man looked at her, his eyes unfocused. I can't. My chest. Maya's heart kicked into high gear. She'd seen this before, when her mother's friend had a heart attack at their apartment 2 years ago. She grabbed the man's arm, helping him sit down on the bench. "Don't move. I'm calling for help." Her fingers shook as she dialed 911. The operator's calm voice came through the line. "What's your emergency?" "There's a man having a heart attack at the bus stop on 5th and Maple. He's conscious but in pain. He's sweating and having trouble breathing." The operator asked questions, and Maya answered them all while keeping one hand on the man's shoulder. His skin was clammy through his expensive coat. Other people were starting to notice now, a small crowd forming, but no one else stepped forward to help. "Ambulance is on the way. Stay with him and keep him calm." Maya knelt beside the bench, looking into the man's frightened eyes. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." "What's your name?" "Robert," he gasped. "Robert Thornton." "I'm Maya. Robert, I need you to stay with me. Keep breathing, nice and slow. The ambulance will be here soon." Robert's hand found hers and gripped it tight. Maya squeezed back, talking to him in a steady voice, the same way the nurses had talked to her mother during the bad nights. She told him about the weather, about her algebra test, about anything she could think of to keep him conscious and calm. It felt like forever, but it was probably only 6 minutes before the ambulance arrived, sirens wailing. Paramedics jumped out, and Maya quickly explained what had happened, what symptoms she'd observed. They worked fast, professional and efficient, getting Robert onto a stretcher and hooking him up to machines. "You did good, kid," one of the paramedics said. Quick thinking. As they loaded Robert into the ambulance, his hand reached out again. "Please," he said to Maya. "Don't leave me alone." Maya didn't hesitate. She climbed into the ambulance, her backpack still on her shoulders. The paramedic didn't object, probably assuming she was Robert's granddaughter or something. The ride to the hospital was a blur of beeping machines and urgent medical jargon. Maya held Robert's hand the whole way, feeling oddly responsible for this stranger she'd just met. He kept his eyes on her face, using her as an anchor against the pain and fear. At the emergency room, everything became chaos. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Robert's stretcher, wheeling him toward the cardiac unit. Maya followed until a nurse gently stopped her. "You'll have to wait here, honey." "Are you family?" "No, I found him. I wanted to make sure he was okay." The nurse's expression softened. "That was very kind of you. Have a seat in the waiting room. We'll update you when we can." Maya sank into one of the plastic chairs, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and drained. She looked at her phone. 8:15. She'd missed the quiet evening at the library, but somehow that didn't seem important anymore. The waiting room was warm, at least. Maya pulled her homework out of her backpack, trying to focus on English literature. But the words blurred on the page. She kept seeing Robert's frightened eyes, feeling his hand gripping hers. An hour passed, then another. Around 10 o'clock, a nurse approached her. "Are you the young lady who came in with Robert Thornton?" Maya stood up quickly. "Yes, is he okay?" "He's stable. You saved his life, you know. If you hadn't called when you did, if you hadn't kept him calm, well, let's just say he's very lucky you were there." The nurse studied Maya more closely, taking in her worn jacket and the backpack that never left her side. "Have you eaten dinner, honey?" Maya shook her head. The nurse disappeared and returned a few minutes later with a sandwich, a bag of chips, and a cup of coffee. "Here, you've had a rough evening." "Thank you," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly. The kindness felt overwhelming after such a long, difficult day. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. The sandwich was just turkey and cheese, but it tasted like the best meal she'd had in weeks. The coffee was bitter and too hot, but it warmed her from the inside out. By 11 o'clock, the hospital had grown quieter. Maya knew she should leave, find her way back to her spot behind the library, try to get some sleep before school tomorrow. But the waiting room was so warm, and the chairs, while uncomfortable, were better than the cold ground. A different nurse passed by and smiled at her. "Still here? You're a dedicated friend." Maya just nodded, not correcting the assumption. "You can go up and see him for a minute if you'd like. Room 304. He's been asking about you." Maya found her way to the 3rd floor, following the signs to the cardiac unit. Room 304 was at the end of the hall. She knocked softly. "Come in," a weak voice called. Robert was propped up in bed, connected to an IV and a heart monitor. His color was better, though, and his eyes were clear. When he saw Maya, his face broke into a smile. "You stayed," he said. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Because of you, I am. The doctors told me what you did. You saved my life, young lady. Maya felt her cheeks heat up. I just called 911. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't. Everyone else walked right past me. You stopped. You stayed. That means something. They talked for a few minutes, though Maya could see Robert was tired. He asked about her school, and she found herself telling him about her classes, her college applications, keeping the conversation light and easy. She didn't mention the homelessness, the job she'd just lost, the fear that was her constant companion. A doctor came in to check on Robert, and Maya took that as her cue to leave. I should go. I'm glad you're okay, Mr. Thornton. Robert, please. And thank you, Maya. Truly. Maya made her way out of the hospital into the cold night air. It was nearly midnight now. She'd have to walk back to the library, hope her spot was still available, try to get a few hours of sleep before the morning routine started all over again. But as she walked through the quiet streets, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Purpose, maybe. She'd made a difference today. She'd saved someone's life. In a world where she often felt invisible, forgotten, worthless, tonight she'd mattered. Tonight she'd been someone's hero. Maya didn't know that Robert Thornton wasn't just anyone. She didn't know about his wealth, his influence, or his determination to find and thank the teenager who'd saved him. She didn't know that this one act of kindness was about to change her entire life. All she knew was that despite losing her job, despite the cold night ahead, despite all the struggles waiting for her tomorrow, right now she felt something she hadn't felt since her mother died. She felt proud of herself, and sometimes on the hardest nights, that's enough to keep going. Robert Thornton woke up in the hospital room to find his daughter sitting beside his bed. Elizabeth had driven 3 hours through the night the moment the hospital called her. Her eyes were red from crying, but she managed to smile when she saw him awake. Dad? She breathed, gripping his hand. You scared me to death. I'm okay, sweetheart. Thanks to a remarkable young woman. Over the next hour, Robert told Elizabeth everything he could remember about Maya. The way she'd appeared out of nowhere when everyone else walked past. How she'd held his hand and kept him calm, talking to him about algebra tests and weather while his heart was trying to give out. The ride in the ambulance, her quiet presence that had kept the fear at bay. She saved my life, Elizabeth. And then she just disappeared. I need to find her. I need to thank her properly. Elizabeth nodded, already pulling out her phone. What was her name? Maya. She said her name was Maya. That was all Robert knew. No last name, no address, no phone number. Just a teenage girl with kind eyes and a worn jacket who'd given him a second chance at life. The hospital staff tried to help. They checked their records, but the information Maya had given was minimal and likely incomplete. The address she'd listed didn't exist. The phone number went to a disconnected line. It was as if she'd been a ghost there one moment and gone the next. She's hiding something, Elizabeth said thoughtfully, staring at the paperwork. People don't give fake information unless they have a reason. Robert's business partner, George, arrived that afternoon with flowers and concern. He'd been Robert's friend for 30 years. Through the building of their real estate development company, through the death of Robert's wife 3 years ago, through all of life's ups and downs. You're too stubborn to let a heart attack keep you down, George said, trying for humor but not quite hiding his worry. Robert told him about Maya too. It was clear the girl had made a profound impact on him. I keep thinking, George, about how many people walked right past me. Dozens of them. All too busy, too distracted, too wrapped up in their own lives to notice a man dying at a bus stop. But she noticed, George said quietly. She noticed. A kid who probably has her own problems, her own life to worry about. And she stopped. She stayed. After George left, Elizabeth began her search in earnest. She was a lawyer, skilled at investigation and research. She started with the obvious places: social media, public records, school databases. Nothing came up for anyone named Maya matching the description at that address. She called the bus company, asking about security footage from the stop. They were reluctant at first, citing privacy concerns, but when Elizabeth explained the situation, they agreed to review the tapes. The footage showed everything Robert had described. A teenage girl with a backpack, stopping to help when no one else would. Elizabeth posted on the local community Facebook groups, describing the incident and asking if anyone knew a teenage girl named Maya, who'd been at 5th and Maple on that Tuesday evening. The post was shared hundreds of times, but the leads went nowhere. Several people claimed to know her, wanting the reward Elizabeth had offered, but none of them checked out. The local news picked up the story. Man saved by mystery teen angel ran on the evening broadcast. They showed a brief clip from the security footage, Maya's face partially visible as she knelt beside Robert. Elizabeth appeared on camera, appealing to the public. "My father is alive because of this young woman's quick thinking and compassion. We just want to find her to thank her properly. If you know who she is, please contact us." The tips flooded in. The hospital receptionist fielded dozens of calls. Most were well-meaning but wrong. Some were clearly people hoping for reward money. One woman claimed her daughter was Maya, but the girl was 12 and lived in a different state. Days turned into a week. Robert was released from the hospital with strict orders to rest, change his diet, and reduce stress. His near-death experience had changed him. He found himself thinking about his late wife, Catherine, and the conversations they'd had about giving back, about doing more for their community. Catherine had always wanted to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. They'd talked about it for years, planning and dreaming, but somehow there was always a reason to wait. Another business deal, another project, another year, and then Catherine got sick and suddenly there was no more time. "I think she sent Maya to me," Robert told Elizabeth one evening. They were sitting in his study, surrounded by photos of Catherine. "Your mother. I think this is her way of reminding me about the promises I made." Elizabeth didn't argue. She just squeezed her father's hand. The break in the case came from an unexpected source. A teacher at Lincoln High School saw the news story and thought the girl in the footage looked familiar. The backpack, the posture, something about the way she moved. The teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had been at Lincoln for 15 years and prided himself on knowing his students. He watched the footage again and again, freezing the frame on Maya's face. It was grainy, but something about her reminded him of a quiet girl in his AP English class. Brilliant student, always prepared, but there was something about her that struck him as different. She never asked for extensions, never made excuses, but she had this look in her eyes sometimes, like she was carrying the weight of the world. Mr. Rodriguez called the number Elizabeth had provided in the news segment. "I'm not certain, but I think the girl you're looking for might be a student at our school. Her name is Maya Carter." Elizabeth's heart raced. Finally, a real lead. "Can you tell me anything else about her?" "She's a senior. Excellent student. Keeps to herself mostly. I can't give out personal information, but if you come to the school and speak with our principal, they might be able to help." The next morning, Elizabeth arrived at Lincoln High School with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Principal Stevens met with her in his office, listening carefully as Elizabeth explained the situation. "Maya Carter," he said slowly, recognition dawning on his face. "Yes, she's one of our students. I can't share details about her personal situation without parental consent, but—" He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "But what?" Elizabeth pressed gently. Principal Stevens looked at her for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Ms. Thornton, I think you should speak with our school counselor, Mrs. Chen. She's been working closely with Maya." Mrs. Chen's office was small and warm, filled with plants and inspirational posters. The counselor was a kind-faced woman in her 50s who'd clearly dedicated her life to helping students. When Elizabeth explained why she was there, Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. "That was Maya. She saved your father's life?" "Yes. We've been searching for her for over a week." Mrs. Chen sat back in her chair and Elizabeth could see her weighing privacy concerns against the opportunity this might represent. Finally, she spoke carefully. "Maya is an exceptional young woman facing very difficult circumstances. I can't share specifics, but I can tell you that she's been dealing with challenges that would break most people her age." "What kind of challenges?" "The kind that make a person give fake information to hospitals. The kind that make a person try very hard to be invisible." Elizabeth felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Is she in danger? Is someone hurting her?" "Not in the way you mean, but life is hurting her, and she's been trying so hard to handle it all alone." Mrs. Chen leaned forward. "Your father's gratitude might mean more to her than you realize, but approaching her needs to be done carefully. Maya is proud and she's scared, and she's been let down by a lot of systems that were supposed to help her. They made a plan. Mrs. Chen would speak with Maya first, explain the situation, and see if she was willing to meet with the Thornton family. Elizabeth would wait, as hard as that was. But Elizabeth wasn't content to just wait. That afternoon, with Mrs. Chen's subtle guidance about what time school let out and which exit Maya typically used, Elizabeth positioned herself across the street from Lincoln High. She watched as students poured out of the building, loud and energetic, freed from another day of classes, and then she saw her. Maya walking alone, that same backpack on her shoulders, head down against the cold wind. Elizabeth followed at a distance, careful not to be noticed. She watched Maya walk past the bus stop, past the stores and restaurants where other students stopped for snacks. She watched her enter a storage facility, stay for 10 minutes, then leave with the backpack seeming somehow lighter. As the sun began to set, Elizabeth continued following, her heart breaking with every step. She watched Maya head to the public library, watched her slip around to the back when it closed, watched her pull out a sleeping bag from her backpack and arrange it behind a dumpster. Elizabeth sat in her car in the parking lot, tears streaming down her face. This girl, this brave, kind, remarkable girl who'd saved her father's life, was homeless, sleeping behind a library, going to school every day and maintaining perfect grades while living on the streets. She called her father immediately. "Dad, I found her." "And you won't believe what I learned." Elizabeth told him everything. About the sleeping bag, the storage unit, the way Maya had walked past every warm building and every food source to hide behind a library. About the backpack that carried her whole life. About the teacher and counselor who clearly cared but were bound by systems and rules. Robert was quiet for a long time after she finished. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "That girl saved my life, Elizabeth. She had nothing, was dealing with all of that, and she still stopped to help a stranger. I know, Dad. We have to do something. Not because we owe her a debt, though we do, but because it's the right thing. Because your mother would have wanted it. Because Maya deserves better than sleeping behind a dumpster. What do you want to do?" Robert's answer was immediate. "Everything. We're going to do everything we can for her, but first we need to meet her properly. Can you arrange that with the counselor?" The next morning, Mrs. Chen called Maya into her office. Maya came reluctantly, worried she'd done something wrong. The counselor smiled warmly and gestured to a chair. "Maya, I need to talk to you about something important. Do you remember helping a man at the bus stop last week? A man who was having a heart attack?" Maya's eyes widened. "Mr. Thornton? Is he okay?" "He's fine, thanks to you. And he's been desperately searching for you ever since. His daughter would like to meet you, to thank you on her father's behalf." Mrs. Chen paused. "They're very grateful, Maya, and I think you should hear what they have to say." Maya felt fear and confusion warring in her chest. She'd given fake information at the hospital specifically to avoid this kind of attention. "I don't need thanks. I just did what anyone would do." "Not everyone would, Maya. And I really think you should give them a chance." Looking into Mrs. Chen's kind eyes, seeing something there that looked almost like hope, Maya found herself nodding. She had no idea that this meeting would be the beginning of the miracle she never expected. Maya's hands were shaking as she stood outside Mrs. Chen's office the next afternoon. Through the small window in the door, she could see a well-dressed woman sitting in one of the chairs. This had to be Robert Thornton's daughter. Everything about her spoke of a different world. Expensive coat, professional haircut, the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about where your next meal would come from. Maya almost turned around and left. She didn't belong in that world. She had nothing to offer these people except the simple act of being a decent human being. And that shouldn't require this kind of formal thank you. But Mrs. Chen had asked her to come, and Maya respected the counselor too much to just disappear. She knocked softly and entered. Elizabeth Thornton stood immediately, her face breaking into a warm smile. "Maya, thank you so much for coming." Up close, Maya could see that Elizabeth's eyes were kind, almost gentle. Some of her anxiety eased. "I'm glad your father is okay," Maya said quietly. "He wants to meet you, to thank you in person. Would you be willing to visit him? Perhaps this Saturday?" Maya hesitated. She'd planned to pick up extra hours at the storage facility that weekend, organizing units for cash under the table. But looking at Elizabeth's hopeful expression, she found herself nodding. They exchanged phone numbers, and Elizabeth promised to pick her up on Saturday morning. Maya gave her the address of the public library, saying she'd meet her there. It was neutral ground, and it kept her secrets safe. As Maya left the office, she didn't notice Elizabeth watching her through the window, tracking her movements with concern. didn't notice as Elizabeth followed her again that evening, though this time with a specific purpose. Elizabeth needed to understand the full scope of Maya's situation. The sleeping arrangement behind the library was heartbreaking, but there had to be more to the story. How was she managing school? Where did she keep her things? How was she surviving day to day? She watched Maya enter the storage facility again. This time, Elizabeth waited a full 30 minutes before approaching the front desk, where a bored-looking teenager sat scrolling through his phone. "Excuse me," Elizabeth said, putting on her lawyer voice, professional, authoritative. "I'm trying to locate a storage unit for my niece, Maya Carter. She's storing some family belongings here, and we need to access them for estate purposes." The kid barely looked up. "Can't give out that information without her present." Elizabeth had expected this. She pulled out $200 and laid it on the counter. "I'm not asking you to give me access. I just need to know she has a unit here and that she's keeping up with payments. Family concern." The money disappeared into the kid's pocket. He typed something into the computer. "Unit 127 paid through next month. Small unit 10 by 5. Thank you." Elizabeth left quickly, her heart heavy with the confirmation. A tiny storage unit that probably cost $60 a month, taking a huge chunk of whatever money Maya could scrape together. Over the next 2 days, Elizabeth did something she'd never done before. She became an investigator of Maya's life, though it felt uncomfortably like stalking. She told herself it was necessary, that they needed to understand Maya's situation to truly help her. She went to Burger Palace and spoke with Luis, identifying herself as a family friend. Luis was protective at first, but when Elizabeth explained about Robert's life being saved, his demeanor changed. "Maya's a good kid," Luis said, his accent thick with emotion. "Best worker I ever had. Smart, reliable, never complains. She lost her job here last week because of paperwork issues, but I'd hire her back in a heartbeat if I could." "Do you know where she lives?" Luis looked away. "I know where she doesn't live. And I know she's dealing with more than any 17-year-old should have to deal with. But she never asked for pity, never made excuses. Just showed up and worked hard." Elizabeth thanked him and left, the picture becoming clearer and more heartbreaking with each piece of information. She spoke to Maya's algebra teacher, who described her as brilliant but tired. "She spaces out sometimes like she's not getting enough sleep. But her test scores are perfect. I've never seen a student work so hard." At the community center, Elizabeth learned about the early morning showers, the careful timing, the way Maya slipped in and out without drawing attention. "We have a lot of students who use our facilities," the desk attendant said. "But Maya's different. She's always respectful, always cleans up after herself. Good kid." Every conversation added another layer to Elizabeth's understanding. Maya wasn't just homeless, she was strategically surviving. Every action was calculated, every resource carefully utilized. She'd created an entire infrastructure to maintain the appearance of normalcy while living a nightmare. On Thursday evening, Elizabeth returned to the library and waited. She watched as Maya came around the corner just after 9, when the building closed. Watched her check the area carefully before setting up her sleeping bag. Watched her pull out homework and a small flashlight, studying in the dim glow while sitting on concrete in 40-degree weather. Elizabeth sat in her car, tears running down her face, and called her father. "Dad, it's worse than we thought. So much worse. Tell me." She described everything she'd learned. The storage unit, the lost job, the way Maya showered at the community center and studied by flashlight behind a dumpster, the perfect grades despite impossible circumstances, the pride that kept her from asking for help. 8 months, Dad. She's been living like this for 8 months, since her mother died. She's 17 years old and she's been surviving on the streets while maintaining a 3.8 GPA and applying to colleges. Robert was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Your mother and I talked about doing something meaningful with our money. We always said someday and eventually. Well, Catherine's gone and I almost followed her. Maya gave me a second chance. Now I'm going to give her one." "What do you want to do?" "Everything. But first we need to approach this carefully. Maya's proud. She's been surviving on her own terms. We can't just swoop in and take over her life." Friday afternoon, Elizabeth met with Mrs. Chen again. They discussed Maya's situation frankly now, the counselor sharing what she knew while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. "We've been trying to help her for months," Mrs. Chen said, "but Maya's afraid of the foster care system. She's heard horror stories from other students, And honestly, with only months left until she turns 18 and graduates, she didn't want to risk being placed far from her school and job. So she chose homelessness over foster care. She chose independence over uncertainty. In her mind, at least, she has control over her own life this way, even if that life is difficult. What about relatives? There's really no one. Mrs. Chen shook her head. Her mother was an only child. Father was never in the picture. Maternal grandmother died years ago. It's just been Maya on her own. Elizabeth left the meeting more determined than ever. That evening, she and Robert had a long conversation about exactly how to approach Maya. How to offer help without making her feel like charity case. How to change her life without destroying her pride. She needs to feel like she's earned this, Robert said. Not that we're just throwing money at her out of obligation. But Dad, you don't owe her anything beyond a thank you. Maybe not. But I want to do this. And I want to do it right. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. Elizabeth picked up Maya from the library parking lot at 10 o'clock. Maya climbed into the car wearing her cleanest clothes, her hair still damp from the community center shower. She looked nervous but determined. My father's really looking forward to meeting you, Elizabeth said, keeping her tone light and friendly. They drove through neighborhoods that made Maya's chest tight. Beautiful houses with manicured lawns, streets where people walked dogs and pushed strollers. The world she used to know, before cancer bills and death certificates and eviction notices. Robert Thornton's house was exactly what Maya expected. Large, elegant, perfectly maintained. Elizabeth led her inside to a cozy study where Robert sat in a leather chair, looking healthier than he had at the hospital but still moving carefully. He stood when Maya entered, his face breaking into a genuine smile. Maya, I've been hoping to see you again. They shook hands and Robert gestured to a comfortable chair near his. Please sit. Can we get you something? Coffee? Tea? We have lunch ready if you're hungry. Maya's stomach growled quietly at the mention of lunch, but she shook her head. I'm fine, thank you. Robert settled back in his chair, studying her with kind eyes. I wanted to meet you properly to thank you for what you did. The doctors told me that your quick thinking and actions saved my life. A few more minutes and I wouldn't be here. I just called 911, anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, Maya. Dozens of people walked past me. You were the one who stopped. The one who stayed. That takes a special kind of courage and compassion. They talked for a while about that night, about Robert's recovery, about his late wife and how she'd always believed in helping others. Maya relaxed slightly, finding Robert's warm manner genuine and non-judgmental. Then Robert leaned forward slightly, his expression growing serious. Maya, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty. Elizabeth has been looking for you to thank you, and in the process, she's learned some things about your situation. Maya went rigid, her face flushing. I don't know what you think you know, but you're homeless, Robert said gently. You've been living behind the library since your mother passed away. You're working hard to maintain your grades and your dignity, while surviving circumstances that would break most adults. Maya stood up abruptly, shame and anger warring in her chest. You had no right to investigate me. I saved your life because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted anything from you. I know that, Robert said calmly. Please sit down. Just hear me out. Something in his tone made Maya pause. Slowly, she sank back into the chair, her arms crossed defensively. You gave me a second chance at life, Maya. And I want to give you one too. Not out of obligation, but because you deserve it. Because my wife would have wanted it. Because it's the right thing to do. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's gratitude, yes, but it's more than that. It's an opportunity. For both of us. Robert explained his plan carefully, watching Maya's face for reactions. The scholarship fund for college. The apartment near her school. The job at his property management company. With each detail, Maya's emotions swirled. Hope, disbelief, fear, gratitude, suspicion. It seemed too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Why? She finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you do all this? Robert's eyes grew misty. Because 8 months ago, my wife died. And before she died, we talked about setting up scholarships for kids who needed help. We always said we'd do it someday. But someday never came for Catherine. He paused, gathering himself. You saved my life, Maya. You gave me more some days. And I want to use them to keep the promise I made to my wife. You're going to be the first Maya Thornton scholar, but you won't be the last. Maya felt tears spilling down her cheeks, unable to stop them. I don't understand. Elizabeth spoke up softly. You showed kindness to a stranger when you had every reason to walk past like everyone else. You had nothing and you gave everything anyway. That's the kind of person my mother wanted to help. The kind of person my father wants to honor. But I don't deserve this. I just made a phone call. I just held someone's hand. You did more than that, Robert said firmly. You saw someone who needed help and you helped them. No hesitation. No calculation. You didn't know who I was or what I could do for you. You just knew I needed help and you gave it. That's the kind of character that deserves support. They talked for hours through lunch and into the afternoon. Maya asked questions, voiced doubts, tested the offer for strings or catches. But Robert and Elizabeth were patient, answering everything honestly. Finally, as the sun began to set, Maya looked at Robert with red-rimmed eyes. If I say yes, everything changes. Yes, Robert agreed. But change isn't always bad. Sometimes it's a miracle. Maya thought about her spot behind the library, about the cold nights and hungry mornings. She thought about her mother who'd wanted so much more for her. She thought about the future she'd been fighting for, the one that had seemed impossible just hours ago. And then she thought about Robert at that bus stop needing help, and how she'd stopped because it was the right thing to do. Maybe accepting help when you needed it was also the right thing to do. Okay, she whispered. Okay, yes. Robert smiled and Elizabeth wiped away tears. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, when Maya could move into the apartment, how to handle school paperwork, what she'd need to get started at the job. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. As Elizabeth drove Maya back to the library that evening, Maya stared out the window at the passing streets. Everything looked different now. The same buildings, the same trees, but somehow transformed. Thank you, she said quietly. Elizabeth glanced at her. You already thanked us about 20 times today. I know, but I mean it. Thank you for seeing me, for looking past the surface, for giving me a chance. You gave my father a chance to keep living. This is the least we can do. That night, Maya lay in her sleeping bag behind the library for the last time. Tomorrow, Elizabeth would pick her up and help her move into the apartment. Tomorrow, her new life would begin. But tonight, she let herself feel the full weight of the miracle that had just happened. One act of kindness, one moment of compassion had changed everything. Her mother had always said kindness mattered, that helping others was never wasted. Maya had believed it, even when life seemed determined to prove her wrong. Now finally she had proof. Kindness did matter. Compassion did come back around. And sometimes, when you gave everything you had to help a stranger, the universe found a way to give back. Maya closed her eyes, warm tears sliding into her hair. She thought of her mother, wished she could tell her about this day, about Robert and Elizabeth and the miracle she never expected. And somehow, Maya thought her mother already knew. Sunday morning arrived with pale winter sunlight filtering through the city. Maya woke up behind the library for the last time, her body stiff from the cold concrete but her heart lighter than it had been in months. She packed up her sleeping bag slowly, almost reverently. This chapter of her life was ending. Elizabeth arrived at 10 o'clock sharp, her car trunk already loaded with boxes. Ready to see your new home? Maya nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The apartment was in a safe neighborhood, just 3 blocks from Lincoln High. It wasn't large, a studio with a small kitchen area, one room that served as bedroom and living space combined, and a bathroom. But to Maya it looked like a palace. It's yours for as long as you need it, Elizabeth said, watching Maya's face. Through graduation, through college if you choose a local school, or until you're ready to move on. Maya walked around the space slowly, touching the walls, the small table, the bed with its clean sheets. A bed, an actual bed. She'd been sleeping on concrete for 8 months and now she had a bed. There's heat, she said wonderingly, feeling the warm air from the radiator. And hot water, Elizabeth added gently, and a kitchen, and it's all yours. They spent the afternoon at the storage unit retrieving Maya's belongings. It was heartbreaking to see how little there was. A few boxes of photos, some books, her mother's favorite sweater carefully wrapped in plastic. The sum total of a life reduced to what could fit in a 10-by-5 space. We'll go shopping tomorrow, Elizabeth said. Get you what you need. Clothes, toiletries, school supplies, whatever you want. I can't let you buy all that. You can and you will. Consider it part of your signing bonus for the new job. The job. Maya was going to start the following week at Thornton Properties, helping with office organization and tenant communications. The pay was double what she'd made at Burger Palace, and the hours were flexible around her school schedule. That evening, Maya stood in her apartment, and felt the full weight of the transformation. 48 hours ago, she'd been sleeping behind a dumpster. Now she was standing in a warm, safe space that belonged to her. She took her first real shower in 8 months, not the rushed community center routine, but an actual long, hot shower in her own bathroom. She stood under the water until it ran cold, crying and laughing and feeling everything she'd been too exhausted to feel for so long. Monday at school was surreal. Maya walked into Lincoln High from an apartment instead of from a storage facility. She'd eaten breakfast, actual breakfast, eggs and toast that she'd cooked in her own kitchen. She'd slept for 8 hours in a bed. Mrs. Chen called her into the office between classes. "How are you doing with all the changes?" "I don't know if it's real yet," Maya admitted. "I keep waiting to wake up behind the library. It's real. And you deserve every bit of it." Mrs. Chen paused. "Mr. Thornton called me this morning. He wanted to discuss the scholarship program he's establishing. He'd like your input on how to structure it, what kind of students to support." "My input?" "He sees you as a partner in this, Maya. Not just a recipient of charity, but someone with valuable insight into what students in difficult situations really need." Over the next few weeks, Maya settled into her new life. She started at Thornton Properties, where she discovered she had a knack for organization and a natural empathy for tenants dealing with housing issues. Robert made a point of meeting with her regularly, not just as her employer, but as a mentor. "You remind me of Catherine," he told her one afternoon in his office. She had that same quality, the ability to see people, really see them, to understand what they're going through. Maya learned that Robert had been devastated by his wife's death, that he'd been going through the motions of living without really engaging with life. "And then you stopped to help me," he said. "You reminded me that kindness still exists, that people still care. You gave me more than a second chance at life. You gave me a reason to want that life." The scholarship fund was officially established in February, the Catherine and Maya Thornton Scholarship for Resilient Students. The name made Maya cry when she first saw it. "You're part of this legacy now," Robert said simply. "Your story matters. Your strength matters. Other kids need to see that there's hope, even in the darkest circumstances." Maya helped design the application process, ensuring it looked for the qualities that really mattered: determination, compassion, resilience in the face of adversity. Not just good grades or perfect test scores, but character. "I was homeless and still maintained my GPA," Maya explained to the scholarship committee. "But some kids can't do that. They're working 2 jobs, or taking care of siblings or dealing with trauma. We need to look at the whole person, not just the numbers,"